I am Chloe Bennett, 35 years of age, an oceanic investigator who dedicated periods examining sea environments. My forebears bequeathed me their seaside residence adjacent Olympic National Park in Washington. My foundation amidst journeys. Following 1.5 years abroad in Maine, following shoreline degradation, I returned to Seattle for a kin meal. My elder sister rose, smiling, and proclaimed, "The dwelling purchased for $500,000. My relatives applauded, labeling it a smart action. I erupted. "How could you?" Prior to I could conclude, she struck me, pushed me to the exit, and whispered, "Leave failure." All stood still, yet I remained composed, understanding the asset was secured under national preservation statutes. The following day, my device illuminated with 25 unanswered rings in 30 minutes. Her recorded message trembled. "They apprehended me." I reclined, tone unwavering, and answered, "Past the point of no return, failure." What she failed to understand was the judicial snare poised to clamp shut. Curious about how her plot fell apart, believe I ought to pardon or depart. Convey your opinions in the remarks, since occasionally one tiny choice can alter a complete existence. Recalling 18 months prior clarifies why I remained so tranquil throughout that kin supper. My family had been urging me for periods to leverage the asset in Washington to bankroll their property enterprises. My sister spearheaded the campaign, constantly contending that the terrain was squandering possibility adjacent premium coastal development zones. I declined on every occasion, understanding the national covenants safeguarded it as vital marine environment for threatened whales, yet she would not cease, particularly after her ventures crashed. She lost heavily on digital currency exchanges and an unsuccessful coffee shop enterprise, placing her in substantial obligation. Father and mother paid for some deficits, yet she required additional, merely endorsed the loan documents. She insisted throughout one trip to Seattle, its kin supporting kin. I observed her despair and opted to utilize it against her. I feigned to concur, stating I would contemplate an initial arrangement with financiers she recognized. In truth, I reached out to my former university companion Trevor Clark, a property attorney situated in Seattle. He assessed the paperwork and verified the covenants rendered any loan or development agreement unlawful, lacking federal authorization. This might be a trap. Trevor suggested over espresso, if she falsifies anything, we notify it instantly to avert worsening. We composed a scheme where I provided ambiguous spoken approval but never inked formal documents. Trevor assembled documents for ecological bodies prepared to submit if she overstepped. My sibling leaped at my fictitious agreement, believing she had triumphed. She began reaching financiers, assuring rapid profits on seaside asset. I recorded everything, messaging Trevor duplicates of her communications. Meanwhile, I reinforced the asset's safeguards by presenting recent intel on whale movement routes to the American Fish and Wildlife Department. They included more rigorous classifications, rendering any unapproved arrangement an obvious infraction. As my primary investigation excursion neared, I understood she would operate while I was absent. Trevor consented to observe the asset documents from afar. "If she submits a deceitful loan or agreement," he stated, "we will detect it promptly and notify the officials. The covenants were not merely documents. They were my armament, tying the land to everlasting preservation. No financier could contact it without initiating assessments." My grandparents had registered it years prior for fiscal advantages, yet it barred development permanently. I departed for Maine, assured that her plan would fail via lawful avenues alone. That coercion from my sister did not commence lately. It originated from our youth in Seattle, maturing in the outlying districts there. Our household was entirely regarding property transactions and turning assets for gain. Father directed the company, acquiring terrain to convert into apartments or shopping centers. While mother managed the documentation and customer gatherings, they brought us up to prioritize currency and achievement overall, directing us toward occupations that compensated handsomely. My elder sister, Diana Powell, assimilated perfectly from the start, assisting father with open houses as an adolescent and later entering the company permanently. She excelled at finalizing transactions, constantly discussing market movements and investment yields. Lena, my younger sister, imitated majoring in business in university and training with them throughout summers, yet I was dissimilar. From a young age, I passed weekends investigating the coasts near Puget Sound, gathering seashells and observing tidal basins rather than going to property showings. My parents dismissed it as a stage, stating, "You will mature past it and obtain a genuine occupation." They ridiculed my fascination with marine science, calling it amusing oneself with fish. Whenever I brought home publications on ocean preservation, family meals frequently became lectures regarding how my interests would not cover the expenses. Observe Diana, mother would state, she is already earning fees. Father agreed, including, we require utilitarian abilities in this household. After secondary school, I followed a qualification in marine science, which they endured yet never backed. Holidays provoked quarrels regarding my unrealistic selections. With Diana scoffing and Lena remaining silent, I worked without pay at nearby aquariums studying coastal environments, yet they viewed it as hours lost. Then arrived the inheritance 7 years prior. Our grandparents died within months of one another, willing their seaside home in Washington to me particularly. The spot bordered Olympic National Park with immediate entry to safeguarded coastal zones. My household was livid, anticipating to market it and divide the profits. It is premium terrain, Diana contended at the will reading. We might construct it into holiday leases, yet I went and adored it. Recalling how grandparents instructed me to recognize starfish and observe seaweed woods, they had constantly stressed conserving the coastline while finalizing the estate. I uncovered the national covenants on the asset. Hidden in the titles were pacts from years ago, enrolling the land in permanent conservation programs in trade for tax reductions. They had prohibited any development to maintain it as environment for endangered whales that traveled through the seas. The American Fish and Wildlife Department had labeled it crucial for types like gray whales, necessitating federal assessment for any modifications. This implied zero loans or contracts lacking bureau endorsement, as it might breach ecological regulations. I kept it silent initially, understanding my household would contest it. Over duration, I provided more intel on whale observations, strengthening the safeguards. I included monitoring apparatus near the coast, recording movement routes for reports. Diana's difficulties intensified approximately 3 years prior. Her ancillary ventures collapsed, first digital currency that plummeted. Subsequently, a shop she launched that shuttered after half a year owing to poor placement. She accumulated obligations and our parents rescued her partly, yet she needed more. Allow me to manage a loan on the home. She pressured throughout a visit. It is sitting there vacant while I am sinking. I rejected outright, referencing upkeep costs, yet she continued pushing, even proposing initial agreements with her financier connections. Family gatherings became strained, with father supporting her. It is for the company, he stated, mother included, consider your sister. Lena attempted negotiating, yet aligned with them. I stood, unwavering. Understanding the covenants rendered her schemes unfeasible as her despair increased. I presumed she would attempt something dubious, particularly with my extended trip to Maine approaching. She began connecting with builders, implying entry to the essential. Diana's endeavors did not cease with those trips. They intensified as her debts increased further. She started phoning daily, leaving voice messages about how the loan could erase her debts. I erased majority without replying, concentrating instead on my task. One night, she appeared with a pile of documents from her financiers, demanding I examine them. It is merely an initial phase, she stated. I skimmed the paperwork and returned them, declaring firmly that I would not sign. She charged me with stockpiling the asset from malice. Yet I clarified it was about respecting her grandparents' desires. The discussion concluded with her banging the door, pledging to discover an alternative method to protect the location further. I purchased specialized equipment for my oceanic research subaqueous detectors for flow routes and sound recorders for whale noises. Establishing them necessitated coordination with regional preservation organizations who assisted placing everything without disrupting the environment. The setup required weeks, involving journeys to the home where I examined links and adjusted information logs. I also sought advice from specialists for protected remote entry. Guaranteeing I could observe from any location, father drew me aside throughout a kin cookout, proposing I rethink. Diana is overwhelmed, he shared. Mother listened and participated, stating a small adaptability could rescue her company. Lena observed from a distance, not stepping in. I restated my position, referencing the covenants and declining. Yet they dismissed it as small obstacles. Diana's ventures kept failing. Her newest enterprise, a property flip in central Seattle, collapsed whenever purchasers withdrew. Loan companies started phoning her office, and she appealed to me again for assistance. "One autograph," she begged over a meal. I declined once again, referencing the judicial restrictions. She exited annoyed. Yet I felt her devising something covertly, with the principal undertaking approaching. I organized a meeting with Trevor at his office. He inspected recent deed inquiries and observed atypical actions from her contacts. "We ought to fortify your stance," he suggested. He composed alerts to dispatch to potential creditors, cautioning of the covenants and possible infractions. If anybody continued lacking endorsement, we would report it to the correct avenues immediately. Trevor also recommended modernizing my coverage to include any unapproved entry. This safeguards against claims, he noted. I concurred, autographing the forms he assembled. We talked about backup schemes for swift judicial action. As exit neared. Diana made a final attempt at Mother's birthday meal. "Allow me to link you with my financiers," she proposed. I refused courteously, clarifying the limitations again. She scoffed, yet I noticed her swapping looks with father prior to traveling out. I met Trevor one additional instance to hand over observation entry. He took comprehensive records on the asset configuration and pledged routine inspections. Any indication of incorrect submissions, I will notify the bureaus. He guaranteed. The 18-month project in Maine entailed everyday field labor on erosion locations, yet I monitored through protected applications. Trevor, quote, "News arrived consistently, verifying silence initially." Then, faint indications appeared, inquiries from creditors linked to Diana's circle. I readied for the unavoidable. Understanding the covenants would obstruct any action 2 days following that meal. I traveled to the home in Washington to verify things personally. The journey from Seattle required a few hours, and whenever I reached, yellow marker flags peppered the coastline adjacent the property perimeter. They indicated locations for possible piers or additions, clearly from financiers inspecting the site. I retrieved my device and captured images of each flag, recording their placements relative to the covenant borders. I also recorded tire marks from recent automobiles and gathered business leaflets abandoned by the team back in the automobile. I phoned Trevor and explained what I discovered. He heard silently, prior to replying, that it corresponded with the creditor inquiries he had marked. "This verifies unapproved action." He stated without postponement. Trevor reached the regional police precinct, submitting a report for suspected asset deceit. He included duplicates of the covenants and my possession paperwork, highlighting the national safeguards. The officials treated it seriously. Vowing to examine the survey company's participation, by midday, Trevor relayed to me confirmation that the report was recorded with redirects to state property authorities. He also informed the American Fish and Wildlife Department regarding possible covenant violations. The financiers, a pair from Portland seeking coastal flips, soon understood the agreement was fraudulent. Their attorney contacted Trevor after uncovering the initial contract Diana had promoted lacked my autograph. They demanded clarifications. And whenever Diana delayed, they submitted a civil litigation for deception and breach of agreement. The suit requested compensation for their duration and costs, plus disciplinary charges to discourage future frauds. They attached proof of her assurances, including electronic mails and meeting records. Diana's device started ringing incessantly from her loan companies, and the financiers' team. She left panicked communications for father and mother. Yet they could not assist much. The litigation documents reached her office the following week, including me as an observer. Trevor guided me to supply sworn statements describing the covenants and her unapproved activities. I assembled, adhering to reality's lacking sentiment. As the instance developed, Diana's company associates distanced themselves, terminating collaborative enterprises. One night, my device vibrated with her digits. I allowed it to proceed to voicemail initially, yet inquisitiveness prevailed. Her voice broke whenever she spoke. They apprehended me. She pleaded for me to affirm that I had endorsed the agreement verbally. I texted back 3 terms. Past the point of no return, failure. The communication felt conclusive. terminating her appeals. Trevor informed me that the police had questioned the survey team, who confessed laboring on Diana's reference lacking confirming ownership. Authorities initiated their own investigation into her license standing. The financier's litigation gained momentum with a tribunal date fixed for initial proceedings. Diana attempted uniting the household, asserting it was a confusion. Yet Lena voiced uncertainties after examining the fundamentals. Father endeavored to broker with the financiers confidentially. Proposing reimbursements from his finances. Yet they declined, desiring complete responsibility. Mother fretted about the exposure impacting regional company networks. Through everything, I remained aloof, allowing the procedure to evolve. Trevor managed my side, guaranteeing my declarations backed the realities. The covenants remained powerful, obstructing any claims on the asset as information circulated in Seattle's property circles. Diana's standing suffered blows. With customers withdrawing from agreements, coworkers shunned her at trade functions, and internet critiques referenced the continuous conflict. 1 week following the litigation submission, Father messaged me to arrive for a critical discussion whenever I reached at their Seattle residence. The entire household waited in the sitting area. Mother sat wringing her palms. Lena walked by the pane. And Diana appeared drained with swollen eyes from strain. Father commenced immediately, clarifying they had received from the financier's attorney demanding reimbursement. "We can resolve this collectively," he stated. Mother added, describing how the information was disseminating among their clientele. Diana got straight to the point, confessing she had pushed the agreement excessively. "Merely inform them you were fine with it," she urged. I shook my head, reminding them the covenants rendered it unattainable lawfully. Lena proposed a kin arbiter, yet I highlighted that would not alter the realities. Father proposed to pay portion of the losses from his reserves if I withdrew as an observer. "It concerns togetherness." He insisted. Mother nodded, stating the company could not endure the controversy. Diana vowed to sever connections with those financiers if I assisted easing matters. I heard as they described schemes to oppose the claims. Trevor had cautioned me regarding this kind of coercion. So I phoned him on speaker. He joined the discussion remotely, describing the suit's advancement. "The tribunal has scheduled testimonies." He clarified. He recommended adhering to the procedure, as retracting now could arouse doubts. Continuing the civil lawsuit guarantees responsibility, Trevor included, noting the financiers pursued complete repayment plus attorney fees. Father contended it was overly harsh. Yet Trevor rebutted that misrepresentation in property carried standard sanctions. I concurred with him, declaring I would not meddle. Diana became distressed, accusing me of relishing the aftermath. Mother attempted soothing her. Yet the space tightened. Lena inquired if there existed any concession, like a partial declaration. Trevor discouraged it, stating semi-efforts could confuse my stance. He outlined potential results, including account freezes if disregarded. I terminated the call and confronted them directly, declining to yield. This commenced with unapproved activities, I stated. The gathering continued with additional appeals. Yet I remained steadfast. By dusk, Diana got notice of the initial hearing date. Her device alerted with messages from partners doubting her morals. One significant customer canceled an undertaking, referencing the continuous conflict. Father's company lost a referral network associate who had learned about the instance through trade avenues. Mother mentioned locals murmuring at their club functions. Diana's online platforms filled with subtle disconnections from occupational links. The regional property board started an assessment of her methods, menacing suspension as the suit progressed. Observers from the survey unit provided declarations verifying her directives. The financier's attorney pressed for evidence disclosure, exposing her fiscal documents. Diana's efforts to settle privately collapsed whenever they demanded public admission. Kin acquaintances ceased inviting them to events, cautious of link. Father's agreement slowed as creditors paused. Mother avoided her typical social groups, humiliated by the rumors. Lena's training proposals evaporated due to the household name. Diana confronted increasing invoices from her own attorney, using reserves. The tribunal approved a request for abbreviated judgment on crucial aspects, favoring the financiers. Media organizations published the narrative as a warning story in Seattle Company reports. Diana's permit came under official examination with hearing planned. The household's standing endured irreparable harm in their close community. Lenders tightened conditions on current loans. Including fiscal pressure, 3 months following to the initial tribunal requests, the magistrate announced the decision against Diana. The financiers succeeded on all charges, with the ruling emphasizing her intentional misrepresentation of the asset's condition. She had to reimburse their entire deposit plus interest, amounting beyond $200,000 in restitution. The tribunal also enforced extra penalties for breaching state property rules. Depleting what stayed of her funds. Diana challenged instantly, yet her attorney cautioned the odds were low given the proof pile. Meanwhile, she liquidated private possessions, marketing her vehicle and reducing her residence to cover the instant payments. The association canceled her occupational credential after their assessment, banning her from working for 5 years minimum. Previous coworkers ceased replying her calls, and employment queries received no response as information spread. One financier posted a critique on trade forums, detailing the experience lacking identifying her explicitly, yet providing sufficient hints for initiates to link the details. Diana's social network contracted suddenly, with invitations to networking functions disappearing. She passed nights alone, scrolling through profiles of individuals who distanced themselves. Father's company sensed the ripple impacts first. Long-term partners hesitated on collaborative undertakings, referencing apprehensions over obligation. One major agreement collapsed whenever the customer referenced the instance in their withdrawal note. Income declined by 30% that term, compelling him to dismiss employees and reduce incentives. Mother's community groups murmured behind her back, and she resigned from a committee role to evade uncomfortable inquiries. Lena, S occupation stalled too, with headhunters retracting proposals after vetting checks marked the household link. The previously tight unit now gathered seldom. Discussion tense from unspoken accusation. I observed from a distance, getting updates via public documents rather than direct contact. Trevor managed the final observer affirmations, guaranteeing my sworn statement stood uncontested. With the instance concluded, I blocked their digits one by one. Beginning with Diana's, no more appeals or charges reached me. I moved my headquarters to a tiny lease near the primary coastline. Plunging further into erosion research lacking interruptions. Weekends provided solitary treks along safeguarded coasts, where I examine information uninterrupted. Occupational networks broadened as I offered discoveries at symposiums. Liberated from kin bonds pulling me back. The home in Washington stayed protected, its covenants unchanged against forthcoming dangers. Preservation groups applauded the result, utilizing it as an instance analysis in their seminars. Safeguarding private limits implied refusing lacking remorse, even to genetic kin. Valuing the surroundings instructed me endurance, transforming possible defeat into enduring power. If you liked the story, please don't forget to like and subscribe.